great compilation tape. Like breaking up is hard to do and takes ages longer than it might seem. You got to kick it off with a killer to grab attention. Then you got to take it up a notch. But you don't want to blow your wad, so then you got to cool it off a notch. There are a lot of rules.
12 albums, 1 cent. Find our ad in Sunday's paper. Take it to your mailbox. You'll get a lot more music. You'll get a lot more life. Look in your Sunday paper.
Welcome, listener. For those about to rock, we salute you. This is our podcast dedicated to exploring and talking about the greatness that was the music of the best decade. If you're ready for the best in retro music topics on the planet, we present for your enjoyment 80's Mixtape Auto Reverse.
Hello, we are back, and it is 1986 Part 2. And we still have a lot to cover. We covered a lot of great stuff last week. Metallica, Master of Puppets, I think, was the highlight of the episode. And we're going to continue more. But first, let me get everybody introduced here. We have Chris again.
Hello, everyone. Metal.
And Timothy.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back. Thanks for tuning in again.
Yes. Thank you again, and I am Scott, and we are going to continue. And I'm thinking we're going to get some really cool deep cuts from this year. I've been looking at the list, and there's a couple on there that are a little bit more obscure but still really, really awesome albums. So what I wanted to talk about something. Oh, dude, Crimson Glory kicks butt. Tim. Thank you so much for bringing that up last time, because that, I swear, it blew my mind. I did not realize that they were that awesome, and I'm starting to rethink of some of the ideas of what I thought was heavy metal because of that.
Wow.
That is heavy metal. It really is. That's some good heavy metal.
No, it's good stuff. It is good stuff.
Amazing.
And then I went back and listened to the 1990, I think it was 1990. Geez, Tim, what was that song that they released late 80s, early 90s, 1990?
Well, they had they released Transcendence in '87, which was, we'll get to that, and then they had a major label deal with Atlantic and released Strange and Beautiful, which was very much a left turn from their previous stuff. So I think that came out in '91. So I'm not sure which album you might be referring to, because they're vastly different animals.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I did. I went back and re-listened to even some things, and I thought it was funny that day. I think I sent you the pictures when some of the songs we talked about came up like back to back on a Sirius Radio.
Oh, right.
There was this just like we had just talked about them, and then there they were.
Yeah. I definitely, I loved that album. I listened to, I think I missed the last couple songs. I got interrupted or something. But that.
No. When Crimson Glory is on, you do not get interrupted. You shoo everyone else away.
And that's all there is to that.
Well, it was hard to do because I was listening to it through my phone, through my radio, in my car, and somebody called me. So that's how I got interrupted. So anyway, yeah, awesome stuff. And I would like to probably check out a few of their other albums because I really liked them. That was probably, looking back now, that was probably my favorite pick of last week because it was just really awesome. So anyway,
what do I win? I need a prize.
Is there a prize? Is there a radio prize? Is it a call-in show?
Yes. Yeah. Congratulations, Tim. You get to host tonight.
Real quick, really quick, since we are doing 80s, and this isn't heavy metal 80s, but one of the funniest bits in a movie that I ever saw was from the 80s, and I believe it was One Crazy Summer.
Okay.
Where
Demi Moore and
John Cusack, where the one
Bob
character that was in that kept trying to call and win on this radio show.
Oh yeah,
I don't know if you remember.
Yes.
It was just it was hilarious, and he just kept getting denied.
Yes. I remember that. That was a funny movie.
Very underrated movies.
Oh yeah.
One Crazy Summer was hilarious movie. Hilarious. Turned a Ferrari into a sailboat, which is fantastic.
Kind of a hidden gem, really.
Yeah, it is. So. It is good. But anyway, so we're on to part 2 here for quite a year, 1986. Quite the season of metal is starting.
It really is. So, Tim, do you want to host?
Sure, I'll host.
Okay,
welcome everyone to 80's Mixtape Auto Reverse, 1986 Part 2. And so we don't have to hear Scott whining about how we steal his picks, we're going to let him go first.
I think that's a fantastic idea, Tim, because we might even want him to pick the first 2 and just get it out of the way. But say it'll also save us from the 27-minute intro. But on to pick number 1.
All right. Well, I'm going to go with Master of Puppets by Metallica. All right.
Is that the remix?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, I think I'm going to have to go with. Now, we've clarified this several times, but I need to reiterate that this isn't always necessarily our favorite album, but just something that was very pivotal in the year. And I'm going to say Slippery When Wet by Bon Jovi. And
Kaboom Boom. Yeah. Good one.
Yeah. All the ladies love this. All the ladies love Bon Jovi. I think I was intimidated by him for the most part, because he's just a pretty man, and he pulls it off very well as far as being the the heavy metal borderline pop star, but he made an impact on a lot of different things, and that industry kind of took a different turn when Bon Jovi really started hitting the scene. This is a pretty powerful album as far as that goes. Hold on. So this album was a big album for these guys. Bon Jovi really, I think this is when they really, really hit the market. They had 7800 Fahrenheit, which had a couple songs on it that did okay. And then they had their EP, or their first album, Bon Jovi with Runaway and stuff. But this one, when you started doing You Give Love a Bad Name, Living on a Prayer, Wanted Dead or Alive, I'd Die for You, Raise Your Hands, almost every song in this album was pretty popular. I mean, it got a lot of play on a lot of stations, not just heavy metal stations, but the pop stations too. So I think they were starting to cross. They were really starting to cross that line into more of a pop genre. So still a pivotal album in my opinion for 1986. What do you guys think?
Well, I'll hop in on this one. Some interesting notes on this. Obviously, as far as metal goes, it was I still think that maybe the quintessential hair band sort of metal album of the 80s. I mean, it had tremendous amount of hits. It put Bon Jovi in a different stratosphere than, just about anyone in their particular side genre of what would be the encompassing of metal. So they did have an alternate record cover, which I'm not sure if a lot of people remember. It had a very, very lovely young lady in a not so loose T-shirt there, which was rejected. So there's the high and mighty who's saying it just can't really do that. which the irony, 30 years later is that, that we've seen a lot worse on, anything. So,
oh my God,
just goes to show you the different eras of that. But I do want to say, just if you take a look at the heavyweights and some of the later would-be heavyweights in the recording and songwriting industry, I don't think it's any mistake that this album took them to a different level when you have Desmond Child come in and co-write the top 2 songs on the album, along with Bon Jovi and Sambora. And then you throw in a producer like Bruce Fairbairn and, another mix with Bob Rock, who is starting to become, like the needed guy as far as mixing, who would then do the engineering and producing later with some incredible albums to his name. So I don't think it's any, surprise with, you hire people like that and your record company comes in and says, well, we're going to give you these guys. And I'm sure that had something to do with it. Nothing to take away from Bon Jovi and the guys that make up Bon Jovi. Mm-hmm. But I think it was a smart choice on the record company's part to say, we have something really great here. It just needs a real kick. And, they got some pretty heavyweights to come in there and do some really good legwork on this album besides them. But, Wanted Dead or Alive became
huge.
It's still on the radio today. And Wanted Dead or Alive, I guess if you backtrack years later, was the song that started the whole, was the song that later started the whole acoustic movement, which would end up, like we talked about with, I think, Tesla.
Yeah.
But if you remember correctly, Bon Jovi and Sambora played this acoustically on stage, I think at the MTV Video Music Awards, a couple years later. And that, to some people, is the epicenter of the acoustic movement. So, which they lived through that to create some more albums later in the 90s and the 2000s. But, Living on a Prayer, You Give Love a Bad Name, Never Say Goodbye, which Never Say Goodbye, ironically, was my prom song. So, that's that. Yeah, seriously, it was.
That's
awesome. I Die For You, like you said. Raise Your Hands, which was in a movie. It was in Spaceballs.
Are you serious?
Yeah. Go back and look. It's it's part of the soundtrack for Spaceballs.
No kidding. I never realized that. That's funny.
So this album it just does incredible things for itself, for the band. Takes Bon Jovi to a whole different level. Good music on it. Can't say there's bad music on it. There's a couple of filler songs, which there is on every album ever, just about.
Right.
But definitively probably one of the top 200 maybe albums of all time in any genre of anything. I think it's in that category.
I don't know. It only went 12 times platinum, so
Yeah, so there you go. It's sold. It's sold a few copies. But great album. Great album for that genre, and like I said, probably for that side metal genre, the quintessential album of the 80s. So it's got to rank high on any list that you would ever have.
Yep. Hello,
Timothy.
Mr. Tim.
Sorry, I thought I heard a phone ring, and I thought Scott was getting his call back there.
Oh, no, I did not yet.
Okay. All right, my turn. Yeah, Bon Jovi, it's funny. I didn't like him at first. Dang it. And I think our very first podcast, before we started doing the year-by-year breakdowns, I think I talked about Bon Jovi a little bit and how it bugged me that he, in my opinion, because I really didn't follow him. Okay, I think I knew about Runaway. And I knew a couple of songs off 7-800. But to me, it just seemed like he kind of hit too big, too fast, and it bugged me that he eclipsed some of my favorite bands. And I just had it in for John Bon Jovi right from the start. And like you said, he was just too pretty, and all the girls liked him. And I was like, man, I wish my bands were as popular as Bon Jovi. So it took me a while, but obviously you can't deny whatever it is, 12, 13 million albums. That's just stupid how many albums that is. He definitely, was serving up what people wanted. And it's interesting too. You talk about this being, hair metal or glam metal or whatever. You look at the pictures and, sure, they wore some goofy clothes, but they really didn't go in on the makeup.
Nope.
And the hair really wasn't that silly, you know. And you look at some of what the other bands, what they were doing in this time frame, 86, 87, and it's interesting because I sort of remember Bon Jovi as being a glam band in a way, but now if you look at it, they really weren't. You know, they certainly played a style of music that was appealing to both, you know, young men and young women. Topics, you know, topically, lyrically, sang about certain things, you know, partying and meeting chicks and all that good stuff. But it wasn't like, it's a little more sophisticated in a way. It wasn't just silly glam rock, you know.
But they had scarves. They did
have scarves.
And tight animal print
Tight
plastic
trousers.
Pants and
Trousers.
Yeah.
Tight trousers.
They had the armadillos in their trousers.
Yeah.
Had armadillos in their trousers. You know, it's hard for me to talk about Bon Jovi just because I have so many just deep-rooted bad memories of them being all over MTV and everybody liking Bon Jovi, and I'd try to talk about, you know, the new Judas Priest album or whatever, and be like, yeah, let's talk about Bon Jovi some more. Like, okay, you know.
Well, I had a terrible prom, so therefore I could never ever like this album for any reason.
Nice.
I mean, it's certainly we have to talk about it. I mean, obviously, it was just a gigantic seller, and like you're saying, it just catapulted them into the stratosphere. You got to give credit where credit is due.
Yep.
And they took Desmond Child from Kiss, so that must really burn you up a little bit. Gotta.
Not really. I like Kiss when they're. You know, that's a funny thing. I could spend 3 hours talking about Kiss, but, you know, I actually prefer them to be the lean, mean Kiss where they're just doing their own thing and not necessarily working with outside songwriters. But he definitely worked his magic with Bon Jovi. You certainly can't deny that.
How funny would it have been if Desmond Child had "You Give Love a Bad Name," like a song that might have already sort of been in his brain, and happened to have been working on a Kiss album and said, "Hey, Paul and Gene, I got this song." And then Kiss releases "You Give Love a Bad." I mean, I'm sure in the history of songwriters and producers that have worked with multiple bands, there had to have been a song at some point that maybe was given and written with one band that could have been with another band, or they turned it down or something like that. How much that would have sort of, could you imagine Kiss doing, you know, "You Give Love a Bad Name" with Desmond Child? And
that just made my brain hurt.
No, it's a great point, though. I mean, you think of all the bands that Desmond Child ended up working with throughout the course of the mid to late 80s, and I'm sure that happened quite a bit, where somebody said, nah, that's not for me, and then, okay, I'll bring it to these guys, and boom.
Right. Yeah, I mean, think about that. If they're in the studio with, just using that as an example, like here's Kiss, and Desmond Child's producing the record and says, hey, I got this song, I've been working on it. It's, "You Give Love a Bad Name" is kind of the chorus part and all that, and this is what I'm thinking on guitar, and Paul Stanley says, it's just that I'm not feeling anything like that. Let's not, the next thing you know, it's a Bon Jovi song. I mean, how much of that it had to have happened over and over again with not only Desmond Child working on tons of records, but other producers that crossed, and songwriters that crossed bands that, one song was given to one and denied or not given to another. How much different that's kind of that's very hard to think about, to wrap your head around that. So that's like quantum physics happening on this podcast. That might not be the best thing to think about.
No, I'm looking at his resume, Desmond Child. Holy cow!
Oh, it's ridiculous.
You could do
insane.
an episode just on this guy's input on albums.
You could do a part one and a part two.
This is incredible.
I mean, yeah.
Not that I'm a fan of some of this stuff, is like, out of my norm, but it's still, these songs, you've heard them, and I just never realized that he was that involved with that kind of stuff. That's pretty incredible. So anyway.
Yeah. But yeah, different show for a different time.
Yes. 1986, metal.
Right.
Tim? You're
I'm
hosting.
still looking at I'm looking at the picture inside Slippery When Wet of
Oh.
the fellas at the car wash with all the young women, and I see that John, of course, John has 2 girls. All the other guys in the band each just have 1 because he's John Bon Jovi. He's the singer, right?
Wait, which picture are you looking at? I don't. Which one?
I'm looking in the CD booklet. There's a large.
Okay. You have
black and white. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
John's got to have 2. He said, "Hey, it's my band. I get 2 chicks, right?"
Yeah.
Yeah, we used to have. There's a quintessential line as far as singers go, and you guys will appreciate this in a video, which was kind of like a concert video, if you remember. Metallica was a year and a half in the life, which was a 90s thing, so it doesn't count as 80s, but the singer. And James Hetfield was talking about Axl Rose being in the news, recently. Mm-hmm. But he said, the stage is getting set up late in between acts because Axl Rose has to have his 25-foot hello, I'm the singer ramp, which was kind of quintessential of Metallica not caring, and then Guns N' Roses to have Axl have a 25-foot in front of the stage, and he called it, of course, a hello, I'm the singer ramp. So that was funny that you said that, Tim. That's funny, funny all the way around.
So, this is pretty incredible. We've already spent 20 minutes on this one album.
Yeah. So who wants to go? Who wants to go next? Who's going to take the next pick? Tim, you up?
Tim's in charge.
Sure, I'll take it. I'm going to throw out another Canadian band named Sword, and they had a debut album in '86 called Metalized. I mean, you can't get more metal than Metalized, right? It had a bizarre cover art that I think is some kind of weird take on it's got to be a gun. It's inside of a 6-shooter or something. I don't know. It looks like this weird metal skull, or it could be a chamber of a pistol. I have no idea. But
those eyes, though, those eyes look like something.
Yeah.
Something male.
Yeah.
Something. Did you see inside the eyes the red spots? Never mind.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're gonna have to edit this.
No, just go.
So these guys, for me, came from absolutely nowhere. I remember hearing their song called "Stoned Again" on Chicago had a kind of a late night metal station called WVVX with Scott Loftus and Glenn the Phone Man and Paul Kaiser doing the Friday Night Bash, and we used to tune in, for a couple hours every night or whatever, and the song "Stoned Again" really caught our attention. It was very cool. The singer Rick Hughes has an awesome voice for metal. He's not an operatic guy. He's not a Rob Halford or Jeff Tate or whatever, but he's got this gritty, perfect voice for metal. I mean, he would fit in with a band like Metal Church or even Old Sabotage. And if you haven't heard of Sword, if you're into like old aggressive Sabotage or Priest pre-Turbo, that sort of thing, or Metal Church, or those kind of bands, they play around with a little bit of thrash, but it's just good classic power metal, American metal. And there are some phenomenal riffs that, like for example, the song "Dare to Spit." When that thing kicks in, you just have to stop whatever you're doing and pick up the nearest air guitar and wail away. You cannot not do that. It's impossible. So these guys, they had another album a couple of years later, then they fell apart, and then Rick Hughes came back a few years later with sort of more of a glam band called Saints and Sinners. So they're still kicking, though, these guys. They reunited a few years ago. They did some shows. There's been talk of a new album coming out, and I think it's still the original 4. I mean, that's just really cool that 30 years later these guys could still be doing something. Cult band, from what I understand, they were actually, I think, handpicked by Metallica to tour with them on the Master of Puppets tour, which is pretty cool. But, they never really went anywhere, as far as I know. I don't know. Are you guys familiar with them?
I'm familiar with one song, and it's a song called "Out of Control," which was kind of a little bit of a thrash song. and I think that was kind of a little bit why they did end up on some of I think it was a short leg, but it certainly was a leg of Metallica, the tour with Metallica. I do recall that song, and because anything affiliated with Metallica at that time, I was listening to something, the opening bands or anything like that, and seeing them. So I'm familiar with that song. I'm not familiar with really anything else that they did in their career, or not much from this album, but I am familiar with Out of Control, and it's a really good thrash song. I mean, it's a great thrash song, and I'm just kind of wondering, like yourself, why they didn't really do much of anything after that. I mean, to my knowledge, anyway, it's not like that wasn't kicking the door open for them to. So I don't know. I do know that song, and it's a great song. It can be kind of disappointing when you get that, it's like that one good song, you're just waiting for something else or the next album to be okay. And I just, they just kind of got forgotten after that. And as far as the music I was listening to.
Yeah, no, it's true. It just didn't happen for them. There's a lot of bands. I'm sure there's tons of European bands we could be talking about, just like this one, where they had one or two just, awesome albums that nobody really heard, and it just unfortunately didn't happen.
Okay, so as you guys are talking, I looked this up on YouTube, and it is available on YouTube, the whole album. And I had it playing a little bit in the background. I don't know if you guys can hear it. Could you guys hear it at all? Okay, good.
No, I can't hear it.
I could hear it a little bit. I had it very low volume, but it sounds like a rockin' good album. You guys, every week, you guys turn me on to something that just is something that I really, really missed, and sorry, no, just a text I got. Sorry, it wasn't my phone call I was expecting. Anyway, back to it. You're right about the voice. I can hear his voice. It is very. It kind of reminds me of. Not that it sounds like him, but Udo Dirkschneider has a metal voice. He has one of those voices that just fits in a metal band. And this guy, I'm sorry, I didn't see his name on here.
Rick Hughes.
Rick Hughes. Sounds amazing. And the riffs, you're right about the riffs. It sounds really cool. And I'm going to have to go back and listen to this whole album. Thank you, Professor.
More homework.
Right.
I love it. I love experiencing this new stuff that I hadn't heard, and I've never even heard of Sword. I got to be honest with you. And
and if people are hearing this and they go investigating, be careful. We're not talking about the newer band called The Sword. We're talking about the 80s band simply called Sword.
Okay.
Must distinguish these things.
Thanks for clarification. Cool.
All right, Chris.
All right, I'm going to go my number one, and this is well within my wheelhouse, but Megadeth, Peace Sells, But Who's Buying? This is, eventually become the big four, one of the big four as far as thrash metal, so they're thrash metal royalty in a sense, but what a fantastic album. It's fast. It's a blur. There's on some of the songs, there's no sort of small pause in between songs. It just goes. It's just boom, boom, boom. Like track one is really not even track one. It's just track 1 through 4, like on the first side, because there's no breaks. So. Scale down the songwriting a little bit, not quite as long, a little bit shorter songs. Obviously not a band that was going to get a lot of radio play. That I'm sure that they knew that. I think also a great story from Dave Mustaine, who got very little respect as far as his guitar playing. He's not the greatest singer in the world. He's a thrash singer, and that's, kind of all he'll ever be, but that's what he wants to be. So you can't take that away from him. But in a sense, what a great thing that happened after he was kind of booted or relieved of his duties in Metallica to come back a few years later and start his own band and write his own songs and just become, probably the second best thrash band as far as popularity, global popularity, and in the thrash genre, to have that done from you, it's hard to name a guy who was in a band and fired and then had so much success after that without having any success in the band. You know, like Ozzy left Black Sabbath and then but he had a tremendous amount of success in Black Sabbath. So, but for Dave Mustaine to do that and then come out and just be, you know, one of the albums, it's got to be kind of in those top 100 albums you should listen to before you die if you haven't already, right? Because it's that good. I mean, it's that good front to back, and it's thrash at its best. Absolutely thrash at its best. Just a tremendous album. One of my favorites. Still have it on my Spotify and listen to it all the time.
Tim, you want to go on this one?
Yeah, I mean, if nothing else, I mean, there's a lot more to it, but just simply because it gave us the title track, which is an all-time killer, the bass line, everything about it, that is such a well-crafted, cool song. To me, what's interesting about this album is there's a lot of instrumental parts on it, and a lot of the song structures are just kind of out there, you know, like they'll just play for a while. They're not like in any hurry to say anything. They're just playing. They got something to say musically, not necessarily lyrically, but then they start, you know, Dave starts with his you know, the lyrics are kind of all over the place on it. It's interesting to read along since he did get known for his being politically outspoken a little bit later on, you know, and it definitely started with this album, but there's the black magic stuff and the kind of cool story behind Devil's Island. If you Google it and you see what it's about, it's kind of all over the place. A lot of, you know, I guess you'd say stereotypically dark heavy metal lyrics from the time, but I just think it's cool that even though the songs are shorter, like you're saying, the whole album isn't very long, but still they do manage to kind of take you on a journey even within those shorter song structures, because they're not verse chorus solo chorus done. You know, they definitely have an interesting songwriting technique, and you know, this was such a step up from the Killing Is My Business album, and production-wise and songwriting-wise, and just sonically, it was just light years beyond its predecessor, and it was awesome cover art. Again, you know, I would really, really like to have a vintage T-shirt with the Peace Sells cover art on it. I mean, it's just an awesome visual.
Yeah, it is great. It is fantastic. And I think the difference that you're saying also, Tim, between Killing Is My Business is that all of a sudden this was the jump to Capitol Records. So you've got a better studio, you have better production, you have better facilities, you have better producers, and Dave Mustaine was involved in the producing, and I think he is also very underrated as far as his, you know, production and his song. But you're right, the song structure is they have some very strange and out of the box time signatures, a lot of not rambling, but a lot of lack of vocals in some parts of the song where you're right, they'll just play. And they're made for moshing. This is a band that on their song structure, it's made for moshing, because when you're in a mosh pit and you're doing this, you're really not even listening to what the lyrics are. You're just listening to the music. So this is like made for mosh. So, you know, Megadeth at this time in a concert with a mosh pit was it was sheer insanity, because the music just went and went and went. But yeah, you're absolutely right. All those counts, Tim. You're absolutely right.
You just gotta love the lyrics to Wake Up Dead, the first song, where I hear the title and then the whole song just flashes through my head. I sneak into my own house. It's 4 a.m. I've had too much to drink. It's just awesome.
Yeah, and he had this way of sort of almost not singing and talking through songs in a sense, but talking.
Don't call it rap. Yeah. But yes, I know exactly what you're saying.
It's talking with melody, or talking to the melody. So it's different, and it's different so much that it made it so unique, along with the fact that there is good songwriting and music writing and all that, and it just pumped. It was nonstop. Like I got kicked out of Metallica. They play fast. I'm just going to play faster, period. You know, we'll see who can play faster. You want to go beats per minute? I'll go beats per minute with you, and we're going to be more. And that's kind of just what I saw. as far as his songwriting. What do you got on this, Scott? Are you a Megadeth fan? Do you have the patch on your jacket?
Oh boy, here we go. So I'm gonna have to turn over my metal card to both of you because I've never listened to this album from the whole thing. I know Peace Sells. It's the only song that I know on this album, and I'm ashamed. Because the way you guys are talking it up, it sounds like I really missed out on something. And I don't know what it was about Megadeth that I didn't get into. I just don't know. I don't know if it was maybe a couple of the guys that I was hanging out with that we listened to music together. Maybe we just never grabbed it and never ran with it like we did with other metal albums like Master of Puppets or, even Rat Out of the Cellar and stuff like that. I know that Rat and Megadeth are completely different islands to their own self, but I never got into it. But I love the song Peace Sells, and I also love some of his other stuff, or Dave Mustaine with Megadeth, of course, Symphony of Destruction and what is that? Truth. What's the song that's Truth about Truth?
Are you thinking of Trust?
Trust. Thank you. Yeah, Truth, Trust, whatever. I was drawing a blank. Sorry about that. Those are a handful of songs that I know by Megadeth, and I'm really I really am kind of embarrassed that I don't know this album. So I can't say much about it other than I'm gonna have to go and listen to it now also. So I have two albums.
But I bet you can sing word for word to Et tu le monde.
I'm sorry?
No, you don't even know that one either. Pardon me? No, okay.
Excuse me? What?
Yeah. It's
Baking powder? What?
Yeah. No, it's a Megadeth song many years later.
Okay, but I did see them live a few years ago when they were one of the opening bands for Black Sabbath when Dio did one of his last tours with them. So
I was going to say, was that by choice or on a dare, or were you kidnapped?
No, I went to see Black Sabbath with a buddy of mine, but Megadeth and Anthrax just happened to be the opening bands. That's
fantastic.
Yeah, it was a pretty good show overall. It was a pretty good show. So.
I would have went to the parking lot after the first two bands.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I never was a big Ozzy fan, but that's a whole different story.
No.
Oh, Dio.
Dio.
Oh, I thought you said Ozzy. Oh, okay.
Did I say Ozzy?
No, you said Dio.
Okay. Did you say Dio?
Okay.
I thought I heard Ozzy.
I wouldn't be surprised if I said Ozzy because I'm getting close to 50 and I feel like I lose my mind quite a bit. So
Are you ready for your second?
Oh, my second pick? Is it my pick?
Yes.
Oh.
Who does number 2 work for?
Yeah,
he works for Scott.
Works for Scott. Yes, we all work for Scott.
Oh yeah, it's too bad I'm not paying you. All right. Oh man, this is a good one. I'm gonna go with Yngwie Malmsteen's Trilogy, and I just listened to this album again just 2 days ago, and I still love it. It's an amazing. I love his style. I love I like the sound. It's just got a really good sound. He continues to impress me with not only his guitar playing, but I think the songwriting and the structure. And then he does, he'll throw in a couple of those classical songs that are, what is it, Opus 5 or something like. Oh, wait, I have to pull up the. Sorry.
I'll bite my tongue here, man. It's Yngwie J. Malmsteen, okay? Come on.
All right.
I'm going to even go further, and I'm going to say, let's not forget, this is Yngwie J. Malmsteen's Rising Force.
Not on this album.
No,
he dropped the Rising Force.
Did he?
Yes, this is Yngwie J. Malmsteen's Trilogy.
Huh.
It's very important. Come on.
But it says there's a couple things on Wikipedia that says Yngwie J. Malmsteen's Rising Force.
I think that was like that with the name of the band, but I don't. I haven't even looked it up yet, but I just remember the name. Tim is right. On the album cover, there is no mention of
it's true.
of Rising Force. So
love that cover. Love that album.
He got tired of that.
You got, what is that, Ghidra? The dragon Ghidra, 3-headed dragon, attacking him, and he's shooting it with a fire blast from his guitar. It's awesome.
So Yngwie is now Godzilla.
Basically, yeah, in human form and with a guitar. How would that be? How cool would that be? Godzilla with a guitar. So I don't know how you would play because he's got those short little arms. All right. So great songs. You Don't Remember, I'll Never Forget. It was one of the more popular ones. Fire is a great song. That was one of the more popular ones. I loved Fury, and Queen in Love. I think that one's a pretty good one too. And these are all just this whole album. I listened to it from beginning to end because I had a long drive, and there was no point when I was tempted to kill it and listen to something else. In fact, I even considered listening to it again today. So it's a really well put together album. I like it a lot. Next.
It's great. For a long time, I called it my favorite Yngwie album. I loved the singer, Mark Bowles, who came from nowhere, replaced Jeff Scott Soto. The only bone I have to pick with this whole album is the song Dark Ages. It's a struggle for me to sit and listen to that one. That's a tough listen for me. But otherwise, this was... It's funny, too, because he's got, 3 songs that are one-word titles, Liar, Fury, and Fire. And it's funny because as soon as grunge hit and everybody started doing one-word song titles, that was like one of the trendy things in grunge. It used to bug the crap out of me. But back here, when Yngwie was doing Trilogy, it was okay. It was kind of cool to have a one-word song title because it wasn't a formal grunge yet. But yeah, You Don't Remember, I'll Never Forget, and Queen in Love, kind of a little more, it's like he was trying to maybe get a little more radio friendly there, but then he would turn around and rip with Liar right after that. And I love the song Magic Mirror, and Trilogy Suite Opus 5 at the end. Just the beginning of that song is so cool. Just that, I don't even know what you call it, just that guitar part he just rips off at the beginning. It's just like, okay, wait a minute, he's playing. Let's stop everything and listen to the man. It's time to pay attention again. Great band. You had the Johansson brothers still. Jens on keyboards and Anders on drums. And, I love this one. This is a solid pick. If you didn't mention it, I was going to for sure.
Yeah, Yngwie it's one of his best albums. I like all the songs that you mentioned are obviously part of it. I always liked the Crying, I think, which is the other instrumental on this album. His guitar playing is so technically sound and, for a guitar player, very intricate. Like, I'm almost to the point where you just don't even bother playing. Not that there's a lot of Yngwie songs that could be like a cover song by a band, because of radio play and things like that, but just to sit down and try to play some Yngwie Malmsteen licks and songs is very demanding. Me as a bass player, I never had to worry about that. But he's something else. The guy is something else as far as, I'm looking it up too. He played guitar and bass in this recording on this album.
So he typically does play bass on his albums, and he just hires somebody for the tours. Yeah,
and conducting, arranging, mixing, production. He cooked burgers during lunch breaks. I think what didn't the guy do? But an incredibly technically sound, but great writer of music and keeping the song alive, which isn't always the case for a virtuoso guitar player. A lot of times you have this just a front man, he plays leads, but he played great rhythm guitar. He would play great fill guitar. The songs made sense. The structure made sense, which at the same time it was unbelievably technical. So a lot of love for Yngwie J. Malmsteen. What does the J stand for, Tim? If you know, I'm just curious.
Johann.
That's what I was going to say. Johann.
Okay.
But actually, if you look it up though, he's got like 7 names. It's an interesting story. Just look up his name. He wasn't just born Yngwie Johann Malmsteen. It's much more complicated than that.
I gotta say, the buddy of mine that I went to high school with, we were pretty much, it was Jim and I throughout high school. He actually ended up having a hamster at some point, and he named it Yngwie Malmsteen. So, just that way. Kind of crazy. So anyway, that was my pick, and I'm happy with it. So
good. It's a solid selection. No question.
All right. So my second is Alice Cooper's Constrictor. This is just a fun album. It's got a lot of funny and fun lyrics. Alice had really disappeared. He made a bunch of questionable albums in the late 70s and early 80s. He really sort of fell off the face of the earth there for a while. I think Twisted Sister kind of propped him back up. He did a little guest spot on their 85 album, Come Out and Play. He appeared in one of the videos for it, and then he kind of got himself together. He got a new guitarist named Kane Roberts. You guys remember that dude? He was all jacked up. He was like a weightlifter dude, on guitar, and his guitar was shaped like an M16. It was pretty cool looking. But Constrictor was sort of like Alice Cooper attempting to be glammy because the songs were fairly simple. They weren't quite as dark and maybe psychedelic and not quite as atmospheric as a lot of the classic Alice Cooper stuff from the early days. It was very much, the Alice Cooper band at this point was long gone, and it was just Alice Cooper the artist with a backing band, which this is where actually Kip Winger, to my knowledge, where he first surfaced, because he played on part of this album and went on tour, and he was in Alice's band for a couple years before he broke out on his own and started Winger. There's a lot of cool songs on this album. The one that people might know the most is He's Back, The Man Behind the Mask, which was on one of the Friday the 13th movie soundtracks. And there's a song called, sorry, somebody getting a call?
Not me.
No.
I don't know what I keep hearing. It keeps sounding like a phone. Sorry.
I think it sounded like a text to me, but anyway.
Okay.
Go ahead.
There's a song called The Great American Success Story, which part of the chorus is the words Back to School. And I just recently read somewhere that song was actually in consideration to be on the soundtrack to Rodney Dangerfield's movie Back to School, if you guys remember that one.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
The triple Indy.
Yeah. In the Kane Roberts guy, he was no Yngwie or anything, but he was a good songwriter. He and Alice made a really good team. They made a lot of cool, catchy, radio-friendly pop metal songs on this album. And, I think probably diehard Alice Cooper fans might look at this as a bit of a fluff album. If, they only, $1 Billion Babies is the best thing you ever did or something. Those kind of guys, they might not really think too much of this one, but it launched him on the, second or third phase of his career, and he rode a wave there for a few years after this one. And I wore my tape out on this. I'd listen to this all the time. It's a good, fun record. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it, but if you're not, check it out.
Yeah, I'm not. I think maybe I don't know if it's good or bad that this was the first introduction to Kip Winger or not. That we should make that a bonus maybe or not a bonus. But yeah, you're right. I think it was the first time Kip Winger was doing anything. But I think it was kind of like you said, Tim. It was sort of his comeback to being popular, because you're right, he did put out some pretty darn bad albums there for a few years. Teenage Frankenstein, I think, was a popular song on this.
Yep.
And so that's as much as I know about this album, but it was definitely Alice Cooper sort of regaining a little bit of foothold in a person who was built for the glam era of heavy metal at this time. I mean, from what he was doing in the 70s to now, I mean, his personality, his persona on stage is just tailored for what the bands are looking like and doing at this time. So it kind of just picked a really good spot to plop himself back on the music scene.
Yeah, I think he was way ahead of his time in the 70s.
Yeah, he was.
And although I've never really been an Alice fan, I do think he's very important to have in the metal industry. And one of the ththings that I always think back to is when he was in the movie Sgt. Pepper. Wasn't he in that?
Yep.
Yeah, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts, and everybody said he was really like he was in an insane asylum, and there was all these rumors going around about Alice Cooper being completely out of his mind, and so that always kind of intrigued me. You're like, well, you know, it's interesting to hear that kind of stuff. And then he comes out with a few more albums later on after that movie, and you know, he kind of makes his way back into the scene, and I really liked him a lot when I saw him in Wayne's World. Okay, that's what I really that's what really intrigued me about him the most, is because he did that little you know spot in Wayne's World where he talks about Milwaukee being the water runs under it, or the river runs under it, or something like that. The old Indian, you know, thing. Now that was from the 90s, I know, but still, it was something. And then, you know, some of his songs, I don't know this album well at all. I remember seeing the album cover. I remember seeing it out there. But I don't know this album well. I don't know any of the songs on it, unless maybe I might have heard Teenage Frankenstein, just because it's probably one of the singles that were off of it. But yeah, I don't have a lot to add to this specific album. But Alice is cool. I respect Alice. I think Alice has got a lot going on.
He's a pretty interesting dude, and he's funny too. He's got this syndicated radio show to this day, Nights with Alice Cooper, and you can find it somewhere online or on your actual radio and listen to it. He doesn't talk that much. He's just more of a DJ, but he does share a lot of funny stories. He's a pretty witty dude. The other thing that's interesting, though, on this, since we're talking about Megadeth a few minutes ago, this was the year in '86 when Alice went out on his Constrictor tour, and Megadeth toured with him, and that's where he met Dave Mustaine, which was significant because I'm sure we all have heard the story. Eventually, Dave, you know, got clean and became a born-again Christian, while Alice Cooper was instrumental in getting Dave on the wagon like that. So, and this is where they met. It's this time frame.
Did you see that article recently about Alice Cooper? His statements about how he's trying to warn people about, you know, Satan and in his lyrics, and he's trying to write songs that are pushing a little bit towards the Christian side. It was a pretty interesting article, actually. I don't know if you saw it.
I did not see it. Also a scratch golfer.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Also, I've heard he's a very good golfer.
He's an unbelievable golfer. I saw him play golf at Innisbrook during during a Pro-Am tournament right up at Innisbrook. Guy's an incredible golfer, which I don't know how that translates from, you know, heavy metal and music, but just something to make, like Tim said, he's a very interesting guy. He really is. He's a Renaissance metal man. He dabbles in a lot of different things.
I think his intelligence is underestimated.
Yeah. He's like the guy that reminds you that he like probably went to Princeton on an academic scholarship or something and then just got into heavy metal. Like, you just don't see him. You look at him and you hear him, and you would never, you know, if you didn't really look at him with your eyes open and understand his story and his background and everything, to say, you know, like, okay, wow, this guy's, you know, got a lot going on.
Yeah, he's a thinker.
Yep, definitely.
Cool.
All right, so now we got Chris's number 2. My number 2, okay, I'm staying right in my wheelhouse right here. And again, I'm going with Slayer, Rain in Blood, which is our first major label. And ironically, a funny part of this album, besides the music, the greatness that is Slayer, and you know, when you hold up the metal sign, one of the first words that comes to your mind is just going Slayer. You know what I mean? Because it's just like, that's it. Every time I do that, that's what wants to come out of my mouth is Slayer. You know, it's incredible. But the album being Def Jam, which at this time was a huge step for Def Jam, to be produced by Rick Rubin, who obviously was in the hip hop genre, rap at that time. It was called like Russell Simmons and the whole like Def Jam recordings. For them to skip out a Metal Blade, which was like, you know, a haven for up and coming metal bands, because these larger record companies would just raid Metal Blade to sign them, like the Capitals, the Electras, all the other album record companies that would just steal. And for these guys to go and jump through and say, we're going to go with Def Jam, and have Rick Rubin, of all people at that time, who later would do more heavy metal albums, go ahead and sign with Def Jam. And not too unpredictable also that, some of the guys in Slayer were also very good friends with Suicidal Tendencies, who are kind of almost a sort of a rap, early rap metal kind of mix. So maybe that was some of the push for that, Who Knows Who and I Know This Guy, and they got together. But again, one of the quintessential albums as far as thrash metal goes. One of those albums that if you like Slayer, you got to listen to it. I mean, the album itself is pretty incredible. It's not a title track. It's Rain in Blood, but the song is Raining Blood. So it's different, not the title track, but Angel of Death. Great songs, Piece by Piece, Criminally Insane, just unbelievable music, great thrash. Kerry King, one of the underrated heavy metal thrash guitar players of all time. The guy can just flat out shred. There's no other word to describe him. He's a shredder. And, one of the godfathers of Tom Arroyo, who's one of the godfathers of thrash music. One of my favorite albums of this whole genre of all time. Great album. A lot of socially conscious lyrics, which, you couldn't really hear the lyrics or hear what they're saying a lot on a lot of Slayer albums. But like Tim said, if you read the jacket of the CD, tape, whatever you want to call it, there's some very emotional, current lyrics, not just Satanistic. They had some of that a little bit before that. They started to change a little bit, be more socially conscious, write about things that were current. And great album. One of my favorite of all time.
Hello.
Yep. Who's up? And crickets.
When we covered Venom earlier in another podcast, this is another band that freaked me out, because I was, I still had a Christian upbringing, and it just the whole Satanism thing it really kind of freaks me out, and I've never been able to get into it. I've never tried, never really given it a chance, and it's just too much for me. So I don't have a lot to add on this one.
The pentagram on the album cover kind of would make you skip over it in the record bin.
Just look at the images on the front of the album too. I mean, there's some weird stuff going on. So
yeah, there's a pentagram and a Pope hat. Yeah. So
and a devil with a snake's tongue sticking out, and just weird stuff going on. weird stuff. It just freaked me out.
Yeah, I just, I don't know. I guess probably it was 20% being scared, 80%. I just didn't like it. I didn't like the vocal stylings and just the insanely fast. Like I can't even follow this song. It's too fast. Because I know some of my buddies though the heavier, the faster, the crazier, the better, and I was like, to a point, to a degree, I was with them on that, but I never got into Slayer until a couple of years later. I think I heard a song of theirs called War Ensemble that I kind of liked, and I don't know, man, but Chris, you're absolutely right. It's funny that I was a total Slayer poser in that whenever, groups of us would congregate or whatever, I'd be the first one to start with the Slayer, just because it was funny,
I am going to give a shout out real quick to a person that's on Twitter. I don't know him, anything like that, but it's a Twitter account that is simply says @guy who yells Slayer. Nice. And all he will do is just tweet randomly at strange times. There's no rhyme or reason to it. He'll just tweet Slayer like with 17 R's, like he's screaming it in text. I mean, literally, it's hilarious. It's at guy who yells Slayer, and that's all he tweets is just Slayer randomly throughout the day for no reason.
I totally respect that. That's funny.
It's the funniest thing. I follow him on Twitter just because of that. And every time I see that, I just laugh.
Yeah.
Like I'm looking at his tweet like 3 days ago, Slayer, 6 days ago, Slayer, just random Slayer stupidity, and it's just hilarious. And you're right, Tim. That's what made me think of that, was just the guy that's in the parking lot with his metal t-shirt on back then, and the first guy that's going to just yell Slayer, and you're like, I have no idea any of their songs. I have never heard one. They kind of scare me, but you're always out there front with the horns yelling Slayer. That's as metal gets.
Oh yeah, it's like the heavy metal Marco Polo game in the parking lot of a concert.
Yeah.
One guy yells
Slayer. Yep. Yeah, it is. Yep. It's fantastic. All right, who's going to roll up with number 3? Is it Scott?
Yep, it is Scott's turn.
Uh-oh. All right.
He's going with Mekong Delta, self-titled.
Ooh,
I think.
Nice.
Yeah.
Is that your next pick?
No. I can go though if you're not ready.
No,
I just talked a lot. So
I'm having a hard time deciding because there's like a few that are like right in that same category again. When you get down to number 3, it always seems to go to this point. I think I'm going to go with Fastway, Trick or Treat. Okay.
Whoa.
And I know, surprise, right? Now, the only reason that I like this one is because of the correlation with the soundtrack of the movie Trick or Treat, which I believe Tim has mentioned in a movie review in the past with one of the years that it was released. I think you guys were doing movie. This is before I came on board, I think. You mentioned.
Oh yeah, with the regular 80's Reboot Overdrive podcast,
yeah,
we're going year by year picking our favorite movies. Yeah, I mentioned Trick or Treat.
Yeah, I think it was 80. It was probably about 86. It had to be 86 or 85 maybe when the movie came out. I don't know, but I remember you mentioned that movie. I'm like, oh, that is an awesome pick for a movie. And I remember Fastway being the band that was behind the songs, and I always liked the movie. I thought it was a fun movie, even though it was Skippy, right? From Skippy from
Family Ties.
Thank you.
Family Ties, right? Yeah, it was.
I always get him confused with Booger from Growing Pains. I think that was who it was. Yeah. Anyway, so Skippy, went on to be a metalhead and loved this guy. And then he was possessed by him, or played a record that was possessed. But I just love the sound. Fastway, you've got that same sound from the album that I had mentioned a couple years ago with their title, their original album. And it's good stuff. It's just really good stuff. So I like Fastway. I just like the sound of Fastway. I think they've done a really good job of keeping it together.
Well, I think they sound like Fastway again on this album. They kind of took a left turn on Waiting for the Roar in '85. I don't even think Fast Eddie Clark played on that frickin' album, and it's his band. It's just there was like no guitar on that album.
Yeah.
But on this one, which is unusual, I mean, it's cool that it was a movie soundtrack, but it was also a little nutty in that there was just one band on the entire soundtrack. I know Queen did it with Flash Gordon, but wasn't that kind of unusual? I mean, typically a movie soundtrack was a compilation, whatever, but, this was kind of, it's cool that they did a soundtrack, and it's just cool that they picked Fastway to do it, It's just an interesting little confluence of events there.
Yeah, and, Dave King's vocals is just, it fit the character that was on the movie really well, too. I think it came off very nicely. So, interesting album altogether. Chris, do you know this one?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I know it mostly because of the movie itself. I didn't I wasn't really a big Fastway fan outside of this. But yeah, I mean, it's good, fun, hard rock music, but Fast, like Tim, I mean, Fast Eddie is a great guitar player. You know, I mean, this was, I mean, I suppose that this in the 80s is the heyday for, you know, great guitar playing, great guitar work, and a lot of guys that you never even heard of really, and you've forgotten. You know, mostly forgotten now. That's how good you like. Now, oh yeah, wow, yeah, Fast Eddie. Eddie Clark was a really, really good guitar player. But other than that, I mean, I couldn't say that I listened to anything from them before or after. So this is strictly me knowing this just because of the film.
You should check out their first album, just self-titled album. It's pretty good. I think you'd like it.
I will. Yeah, I will like it.
It's good. I mean, I still have it in my normal rotation quite a bit.
All right, I am going to, for my third pick, I'm debating, but I got to do this. As a Kiss fan, there was nothing going on in '86 album-wise, except for two of their former guitar players debuted their new bands. We had Mark St. John, who played on Animalize. He came out with a band called White Tiger. And then, of course, Vinnie Vincent, who had been with them since the Makeup years, doing the Creatures tour and then doing the Lick It Up album and tour. He came out with the Vinnie Vincent Invasion. And they both, you know, featured themselves, their lead playing, obviously. They were trying to make their mark, trying to capitalize on the Kiss connection and set out on their own. The White Tiger album was interesting to me because the singer, a guy named Dave Donato, I think is how you pronounce it, he was in Black Sabbath for about 30 minutes during the time frame when Tony Iommi was really floundering. You know, Dio was gone. They did the album with Ian Gillan. They did an album with Glenn Hughes. And there were all these guys. Ron Keel was in Black Sabbath for about 15 minutes at one point.
Really?
It was a really weird time. And I actually remember seeing a buddy of mine had I don't know where he got this, but it was an official Black Sabbath poster on his wall with this guy Dave Donato in the band. So, you know, he was actually in there for a little while. But anyway, the White Tiger album probably sold 5 copies, and I bought 2 of them because I had the cassette, and then I ended up buying the CD. Nobody knows these guys. I'd be surprised. Even Kiss fans, I don't even know if they bought this album, because really Mark St. John, he wasn't in the band very long to leave a mark with anybody, no pun intended. But now the Vinnie Vincent Invasion, though, now that's a different story, because I could do a whole podcast on Vinnie Vincent just because the guy's so loopy, but he's very integral into getting me into heavy metal, because a lot of the songs he wrote were the things that grabbed me. The look these guys had was just so over-the-top ridiculous, with the crazy hair, and Vinny in his pink foo-foo frilly shirts and his pink roach clips in his hair, and the singer, Robert Fleischman, looked like he had a wicked mullet going, and he had to do something to get his hair, so he sprayed it straight up, and he carries a whip. He just looks silly, and you know, the song titles are goofy. The lead guitar playing really isn't that good. You know, a lot of people will say that Vinnie Vincent is a great shredder. I don't think so. I think he's a better songwriter and riff guy than a soloist, because I think when he solos, he thinks too much of himself and he goes on too long, and it's just not that interesting to hear. But song-wise, the guy can write a catchy, cool chorus. He can write awesome riffs. There is a lot of good stuff on this Invasion album if you can get past the self-indulgent soloing. The other thing that's interesting is the last song, Invasion. It ends with this just obnoxious guitar part repeated over and over again. And as rumor has it, the vinyl, when the needle got to the end, you know, the innermost groove of the last song, somehow it like shot back out and it repeated. And so the album literally would never end. It would just keep spinning and spinning. And you would just keep hearing this like air raid siren bit over and over again. And I actually had that vinyl, and I don't remember that happening, but if you look it up, you know, online, you'll hear people's accounts of it, how the album literally never ends. But you know, I know we made fun of Vinnie Vincent before. I know we kind of, you know, that guy got kicked out of his own band. I mean, there's a lot of jokes you can tell about this guy, but at the time, Chrysalis signed him to a huge multi-album, big dollar deal, and it never, of course, lived up to anybody's expectations, but it's a pretty solid album once you get past the look and some of the crazy solos. I don't know what you guys think.
Yeah, I'll agree with you. I don't think he was ever a great solo guitar player. I think he was capable. He was a much better rhythm player and songwriter and song arranger than I think he was anything else. I never was much of a Vinnie Vincent fan. I kind of thought he looked weird, and he just had a strange look about the guy. I don't know. He just turned me off. Just something about his music is good. I just never was a part of this particular type of music. It's funny though, as reading about it, how much of Slaughter would come out of this band from the Vinnie Vincent invasion. Dana Strum on bass. I think Mark Slaughter, it says here, was in a video of the song of them playing because Robert Fleischman had quit the band prior to filming the video. So weird how much of Slaughter, like half of Slaughter, came out of this album, which is
that's
strange.
what I'm saying. That's why he got fired from his own band.
Because,
They brought in Mark Slaughter as a singer, and the record label wanted to move forward with those guys, but not Vinnie.
Yeah. Hey, he's prettier than Vinnie. And funny too is this band has what might be the most non-heavy metal name in the history of heavy metal. It's Vinnie Vincent, Dana Strum, Bobby Rock, and Robert Fleischman. What? Good old Bob Fleischman, but that's your next door neighbor who always throws a ball over your fence. You know what I mean? Like little Bobby Fleischman. It just so funny. It's just like the most non-metal name. I had to say that because it's just reading all this stuff. It's like Robert Fleischman. Why wouldn't you change your name to Bobby Flash or something like that? I mean, just weird. But I think you're right though, Tim. In my estimation, Vinnie Vincent, I never saw him as a super great lead guitar player, but he is a good songwriter. He's a good composer. He's a good rhythm player, and certainly has his place in heavy metal from what I think he did for Kiss. And some Kiss fans will give him credit, some won't, I'm sure. But one of a very undersold, talented songwriter and arranger.
He's actually got a pretty decent voice too. One of the songs on here, he does a duet with Mr. Fleischman, and Vinnie's voice, he's got a real nice, deep, soulful voice. And unlike some other lead guitarists who think they can sing, and you're like, no, hire somebody, But Vinnie could actually do it. Yeah, I don't know, Scott. You into the invasion?
I remember buying this cassette. I remember playing it many times over. But the guitar thing, the solos, like you said, had a tendency to go on a little too much. And they seemed a little bit repetitive from song to song. They kind of sounded the same, in my opinion. And that's something that I just remember specifically about this album. I haven't heard it in a long time. I probably haven't heard it since, I don't know, maybe 87 or 88. I think probably last time I heard this album. But I did like it at the time, but there was something about the solos that were just a little too much. It's like he didn't know when to tone it back a notch,
Well, if you do dig it up again, listen to Twisted and Do You Want to Make Love. Those are cool songs. Solos notwithstanding, those got some good grooves to them, and it's like, yeah, man, they're so close. But
okay, I will make note of that. So I don't have a lot more to add to that. I did think it was kind of fun. You always like listening to just really fast rippers on guitar that they could get so. They could move so quickly and so precisely. I think he was pretty precise too. That's something that I remember. He seemed to be on it, but it just seemed a little repetitive. So anyway, That's all I really have for this one. I'm gonna have to go and I'll check out Twisted and the other one. Do You Want to Make Love? So.
All right, Chris, what do you got?
Well, I'm going to go with my third one. I'm kind of going to stay in the thrash range. This was a great year for thrash metal. Obviously, it was the first big year where really there was some cool things going on. But I am going with Flotsam and Jetsam, Doomsday for the Deceiver.
Wow.
Multiple things. This album was recording on like a less than $20,000 budget. I remember. It's also the introduction to the world, sort of Jason Newsted, who would not too long after this be moving on to bigger things for other reasons. But the only album he did with Flotsam and Jetsam, although they remained friends and co-writers later down the road. But it's just a great album, very underrated. Hammerhead, it's a good song. Iron Tears, Doomsday for the Deceiver. The irony of later, what happened later is they do have a track on this called Fade to Black, which is kind of funny, which is irony, I guess, a little bit. But Jason Newsted also being the main writer. This was really a Jason Newsted album as far as writing and arrangements and everything like that. I think he wrote the majority of the lyrics, probably the majority of the arrangements and the music. He was very underrated as far as being talented in a lot of different aspects. But all around, just a really incredible album. Right in the pocket of the speed metal, thrash metal. You could see here going back why Metallica would certainly bring Jason Newsted in for an audition or whatever it ended up being. But just a great album. If you haven't heard it, I would suggest you find it and listen to a couple of songs. It's a vastly underrated, and I think it's because they just did the one album with Jason Newsted, and he went on to other things, and maybe some of their fans ended up following Metallica more for them to leave to pick up the pieces of losing their main songwriter and trying to pick that up. But just a great album. Great album. Great year for thrash. Absolutely fantastic year for thrash.
I didn't really get into Flotsam and Jetsam until the next album, No Place for Disgrace, came out when I was in college. So I might have heard bits and pieces of Doomsday, but I have not ever really sat down and listened to the whole thing from start to finish. So I guess I might have to turn in, or at least put a tear in my metal card there.
But it was funny too, because Brian Slagle, who would be a very big name in the thrash music genre for production and management and all that, was also Slayer's producer and manager, and also produced this album for Flotsam and Jetsam in the same year as Rain and Blood. So if you haven't heard of Brian Slagle, he had a few years where he's very integral part of the background scenes of thrash and speed metal. So no mistake that he was also involved in this one, which to me, it's the best music that Flotsam and Jetsam ever made, was his first album.
Okay, I got more homework, and this time it's from Chris. So, I remember hearing about these guys. I remember them being a pretty powerful band in Southern California. I think I remember hearing their name a lot in Southern California. So I never had a chance to really check them out and get into them. But then, with Newsted moving on to something else later on, being part of Metallica, that was pretty awesome. But I'm gonna have to go back and check these guys out. So
yeah. I just want to. That was my third. I know we've done a lot in this year, but and we did mention a ton of albums. There's always going to be more and more. Who knows what? But I just want to say something. I just take a quick 30 seconds here. Is that one thing I never really got to explain, even though we did Master of Puppets in the first part of this, is just how much like music changed for me in 1986 because of all the thrash. It really pulled me in, but also in a big way. Probably the one person who really got me to play the instrument I ended up playing. This was the year that Cliff Burton passed away. Mm-hmm. And I can't tell you how much of an influence he was in my playing style, in my enthusiasm for heavy metal and speed metal and bass playing and Metallica. And it was just, I remember being very just, you know, being a 16-year-old kid and being emotional that he had passed away. So I want to just dedicate the last 30 seconds to Cliff, wherever you may be floating with your hair going crazy and your bell-bottom jeans and your Rickenbacker bass. You know, there's not too many moments I don't hear that I don't think about him as an influence in my life in general.
Wow, that's awesome, man. That's a good story. Thanks for sharing.
Sure.
That's awesome. All right. So, was that the last?
So are we really done? Are we really done with 86? Because we didn't mention Iron Maiden.
I know. We didn't mention Judas Priest Turbo.
Right. That was one of my debates on my number 3 because I was trying to stick with stuff that I personally really liked, and you know I do think Turbo is worthy of talking about.
I know.
I don't hate it. I don't hate it or anything, but. And nobody mentioned Poison. I know I'm sure it's nobody's favorite album on this podcast, but it was kind of a landmark thing in the world of glam. Look what
Poison. I don't think metal was ready for a girl band at that point. So
no,
it didn't.
They weren't ready for Vixen yet.
Yeah, where it was Vixen. And I agree with you, Tim, because I mean I could throw there's a Metal Church album on here. Motorhead had an album released this year. I was surprised that, you know, there's Europe, the Final Countdown. Why wasn't that? You know,
I almost brought that up just because.
And I know that you would. I swear to whatever you want me to. I thought you were going to bring up Europe, the Final Countdown.
If you could see what's on my computer right now, I have the list of all the choices that I was looking at. That one is on my list, and it was going to be mentioned just because of that song. And I could not stand this song. This was the most annoying. I thought this is an abomination to metal, if you want to call it that, because that's what they were. It just seemed way too over the top commercial for me. And it still comes down to that today because it's in a commercial on TV in today's world. You know, I can't remember it's, you know, somebody puts something in the microwave. I can't remember who the ad is for. But somebody puts something in the microwave.
I think it's for Geico, but man, that's a funny commercial.
It's a hilarious
I totally
commercial.
agree, and I love Geico commercials. Geico has had their marketing team they're a bunch of geniuses because they're freaking hysterical.
I hope they're very well paid because they make some great commercials.
Oh
they
yeah,
really
I mean
do.
the whole caveman situation. I mean they even spinned off a freaking TV show, which was very unsuccessful, but. Right. It was powerful enough to spin off a TV show. When have you ever heard of that happening in the advertisement world? I've never.
That's true.
It's incredible. Yeah. So, and I'll have to send you guys a couple of pictures. But my dad was the inspiration for the Geico caveman. I can show you pictures that will.
But you're right. I mean, on this album too, like you know, Rat had an album that actually did very well. Mm-hmm. Ozzy Osbourne released an album. I don't think we mentioned anybody picked Ozzy Osbourne. It seems like I'm not like, you know, there's a ton. Voivod, Wasp. I mean, this names that you know as far as heavy metal and that we aren't even able to get to. You know, Crocus, tons.
I want to share a couple that my cousin Josh did. This was a couple weeks ago when I first put the 1986 out there, and then we got bumped by a couple other mid shows that extended our time a little bit. But Josh put out there Master of Puppets because this made me want to play guitar. Slayer, Rain and Blood because it's fast and awesome. Van Halen 5150 because they stopped clowning around and wrote some music. I like that. Racer X, Street Lethal because Paul Gilbert is my hero.
Yeah, Racer X. Yeah, great.
There's a huge Judas Priest connection with them too.
Oh, really?
Yep.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, their drummer Scott Travis eventually joined Priest, and they knew those guys. I think Rob Halford, when he moved to Phoenix around this time, he met like Jeff Martin and a couple, maybe one or two of the other guys from Racer X, and they actually recorded an unreleased Priest song called Heart of a Lion that was supposed to be on either Turbo or Ram It Down. Racer X released it, and then it's a really cool, I think it was a Defenders of the Faith leftover. But anyway, there's a big tie-in with Racer X. It's a very cool, underrated band.
Yeah. So
very cool.
You see his pattern here, right? He's, and then he says Malmsteen. He gave me a lot of suggestions. Malmsteen Trilogy because I still own the CD and it's my favorite from him. Slippery When Wet. That one band because guilty pleasures. Morbid Angel, Abominations of Desolation. Well, it was recorded in '86. First metal band I learned how to throw away the lyric books to before my parents found and read them. So that was my cousin Josh. He loves the metal, and he likes what we're doing here. He's always asking about the show.
I did look this up too. His name is Lars Johan Ingve Lannerbach.
Oh my goodness.
So there isn't even a Malmsteen in his officially birth name. Where the Malmsteen came from, I have no idea. It's almost.
I think it's his mother's maiden name.
It's kind of almost like a Swedish Jewish Malmsteen. Sounds almost like a combination of a Swedish or that Stein. I don't know how that works, but in any case, I did bring up another band, and Tim was like, "Oh, like that one was Mekong Delta." Who absolutely, Scott, if you've never heard them or never heard of them,
nope.
Give a download if you can find it or a listen. It's a fantastic band.
Mekong
Delta. It's like the Vietnam River. Okay. Mekong Delta.
All right.
And there was Fifth Angel debuted this year, and Great White had a good album. And,
there's a lot.
For in hindsight, a breakup that actually definitely had to happen was Merciful Fate broke up, and King Diamond brought a couple guys with him. Michael Denner, Timmy Hansen formed the King Diamond band and continued on in more or less the same vein. But Hank Sherman, the other guitarist from Merciful Fate, did a 180 of epic proportions, and he formed a band called Fate, and they were like such a frilly, foofy, simple pop metal band. I mean, to go from Merciful Fate to Fate, you can really see how musical differences drove those guys apart. You see where they went after they split. I mean, I couldn't imagine those guys coexisting if that's really where their hearts lie.
Now,
and we didn't talk about Hearing Aid, the big.
Was that '86?
Yeah, it was actually done in '85, but then there was a lot of record company crap that kept it on the shelf. But it did come out formally in '86. So technically, we should talk about it during '86. But that was a huge deal that Dio and his guys put together.
We're stars.
Yep.
We are stars. Yeah, that's a great one. Yeah, this was a huge year, huge. And I mean, there's still a few other little gems that are hidden within here that. I know that there's a couple of one-hit wonders in there that you hear a couple songs, you're like, oh, that was a great song, but then they kind of disappeared. So, yeah, that's 1986. This has been a lot of fun. I'm telling you, it's still my favorite year of the 80s as far as album releases. It's, we covered Rage for Order and Metallica and there's a couple others. Oh, Tesla, great stuff there. So, wow. All right. So, Tim.
Yeah, and shout out real quick to one of the underrated guys of this whole year, if you know, but like in Ozzy Osbourne's album, we didn't really mention. I don't think that album got mentioned, but what you call it? What was it called that year? Oh, Ultimate Sin.
Yeah, Ultimate Sin.
Yeah. One of the great underrated guitar players in Jakey Lee on that album. You remember Jakey Lee? Fantastic. I always have to bring up Jakey Lee because he just seems like the most forgotten great guitar player of all time.
Well, he was kind of sandwiched between two amazing Aussie guitarists. You had Randy Rhoads and Zakk Wylde.
Right.
So I think he might have been kind of overlooked in that sense.
Yeah, I'm sure. But that's a personal thing for me. I used to own a Jakey Lee guitar.
Oh, cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
So, all right, Mr. Host, do you want to wrap this up?
Put a bow on it. We're done. Yeah, so
Hey,
that was 1986, the year that would never end as far as this podcast is concerned.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we're putting almost about 3 hours into it total. One quick thing. Do you guys want to maybe do something next week, a short little tidbit on the whole AC/DC Axl Rose Brian Johnson thing? Since we kind of talked about it earlier before we started the podcast.
I don't know. Maybe. I don't know. I don't have much to say. I'm not in favor of it. That's about all I have to say.
All right. Well, think about it during the week, and we'll see if we can.
I'm not in favor of any of it.
Yeah.
It's just, you know what I mean? You know what though? It's one of those things you almost can't. It's the train wreck thing. Like it's gonna be such a train wreck that you won't be able to take your eyes off.
You're gonna have to watch.
Like
yeah,
you're gonna have to watch because it's gonna be such a disaster that there's nothing else to do but just to stop on the side of the road and watch the aftermath of the accident take place.
Okay, so I got to look at my homework again for the week real quick here. I know I have Sword metalized, and I already started listening to it a little bit, and it's pretty awesome. What were the other ones that I was supposed to listen to?
Every Slayer album ever.
Oh, come on.
Yep. Yeah, every Slayer album starting. And then in between every song, you have to run around your house
and
with both hands
Slayer
up in the air, just yelling Slayer at the top of your lungs.
Yeah.
And see how long before there isn't like 3 or 4 Tarpon Springs cops in front of your house with straight jackets.
All right. Oh, Mekong Delta. That was the other one I have to check out, apparently. Right?
Yeah, and check out Flotsam and Jetsam.
Oh, that's right. Flotsam
Doomsday
and
by Deceiver.
Sorry,
yeah,
I gotta
just
Flotsam, Jetsam.
Flotsam and Jetsam.
Yeah.
And Jetsam.
And Mekong Delta. Sorry, I'm not a very fast typer. So, all right.
All right, so let's go around the horn on the whole social media thing. I'm Tim. You can find me on Twitter at TSW512. Scott, where do we find you?
At 80's Auto Reverse on Twitter, at Scott's Eye on Twitter, and at 80's Mixtape Auto Reverse on Facebook.
And Chris is at Christopher Zen on Twitter, and Facebook is just my name, Christopher Warren. I'm not a heavy Facebook user, but Twitter would be the best way to, or just, come hang out in the garage and let's listen to some metal.
Dude,
you're welcome.
Let's do that. We should do that. Seriously. I mean, we're like right down the road
bring
from
beer.
each other.
Yeah, I've got a refrigerator for a beer because I don't drink, and Rosetta likes wine a little bit better. So, Scott, you're welcome to come over here and drink whatever beer is here. It's on me.
Cool.
It's on us.
And Christy likes the wine,
then,
so she can have fun with Rosetta.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, come on, if we're doing 80s stuff, you got to drink like Olympia beer and Bartles and James wine coolers for the chance.
Bartles and James.
Well, or Seagram's Golden Wine Cooler
nice.
and Miller Genuine Draft.
How about some? No, I used to go with the Mickey's Big Mouth.
Mickey's Big Mouth.
Yeah.
Or Lowenbrow, because weekends
Lowy.
were made, and weekends were made for Michelob.
Yeah. Tonight, here's to good
Tonight,
friends.
let it be Lowenbrow.
Here's to good friends. Tonight is kind of special.
Lowenbrow, I mean, you got to drink Lowenbrow because they have umlauts in their name, like all the cool heavy metal bands.
That's a heavy metal beer. That and Heineken.
Okay. All right. I'm after.
All right, back to social media.
We're done with the social media.
To find the podcast, you're going to want to go to Facebook and look up 80s Mixtape Auto Reverse. And then if you're so inclined, look up our sort of parent podcast. Hold on, I blew that. I'm looking at the wrong page. Hold on, you sucked in.
He's beating himself up.
If you want to look for our parent podcast, 80s Reboot Overdrive on Facebook, it's 80s Reboot. We have a blog. It's southgatemediagroup.com/80s Reboot blog. And on Twitter, we're at 80s Reboot. And why not send us an email, 80sreboot@gmail.com. That's how you find us.
Wow,
Perfect.
Tim, good wrap up, man. That's far better than what I usually do.
And while you're looking for all that social media, just have yourself a Stroh's and be really 1980s.
All right. Excellent. Are we good?
Yep.
All right. Good night, everybody. Have a good week.
Good night. You too. Are we still planning on 87 for Thursday or what?
We'll shoot some text back and forth.
Figure it out back and forth?
We'll
Okay.
see what goes on.
Sounds good.
Cool. Later.
Adios. See ya.
We hope you've enjoyed this show. This podcast is part of the 80s Reboot Overdrive channel on Southgate Media Group. You can follow us on Facebook on the 80s Reboot group page. We're also on Twitter and Tumblr at 80s Reboot. We invite you to check out all the wonderful podcasts and blogs available at southgatemediagroup.com. And thank you for reliving the 80s.